Welcome, my dear students of Class 8, to this English class with me, once again, your tutor Atsinyo Sekose. Today, we are going to talk about the lesson, The Last Bargain, written by Rabindranath Tagore. Now, I'm sure you have noticed that in fact, your textbook is designed in such a way that with every lesson, with every prose, it comes along with a poetry. So after this lesson, I hope you will be able to make connection with the previous lesson, that is Bipin Chowdhury's Lapse of Memory and the moral of the story, and make it a connection to this lesson as well. Now let's have a look at this lesson. First, we need to find out a little bit about the author or the poet. So Rabindranath Tagore was born in 1861 and left this world in 1941. He is a seminal figure, which means someone who is very influential in the literature of India, Indian literature, in fact. And he wore many hats, which means he is able to do so many things. He has so many skills. He is known as a poet who writes poetry, known as a painter who paints, a writer who writes different kinds of genre, and a playwright, that means writing drama, a composer as well, which means composing music. And most importantly, he is known as a philosopher. Now, what is a philosopher? Philosopher is derived from the Greek word philo, which means love. And love for what? Love for truth. So this is going to be very important in our lesson, that is The Last Bargain, and I hope you will be taking note of this. Now, he is also a social reformer. I'm sure you must have heard about Shanti Niketan, which is a Sanskrit word which stands or means the abode of peace. And he has written a lot of work while he was there at Shanti Niketan. Now we will find that through his work, he has brought many changes in the society, in the community. So that's why he's also known as a philosopher and a social reformer. Now all these things have very close connection with our lesson, that is The Last Bargain. But before we delve into the lesson, let's do a few exercises here. Do you ever wish that you have so much power like a king that you can do anything or control anything? Or do you ever wish that you have lots of money, lots of gold coins, which you can use it to buy anything? Or maybe for some of you, it is wishing to be the most beautiful person or the most handsome person, or to possess beautiful things. Now, what are these things has to do with the last bargain? Let's find out. I hope you would be taking out your textbook and reading this along with me. "Come and hire me," I cried, while in the morning I was walking on the stone-paved road. Sword in hand, the king came in his chariot. He held my hand and said, "I will hire you with my power." But his power counted for naught, and he went away in his chariot. In the heat of midday, the houses stood with shut doors. I wandered along the crooked lane. An old man came out with his bag of gold. He pondered and said, "I will hire you with my money." He weighed his coins one by one, but I turned away. It was evening. The garden hedge was all aflower. The fair maid came out and said, "I will hire you with a smile." Her smile paled and melted into tears, and she went back alone into the dark. The sun glistened on the sand, and the sea waves broke waywardly. A child sat playing with shells. He raised his head and seemed to know me and said, I hire you with nothing. From henceforward, that bargain, struck in child's play, made me a free man. So that is our poem, The Last Bargain, written by Rabindranath Tagore. Now let's try to understand the poem here. Here are some few word meaning. Bargain, the first word that struck our mind when we look in at the title is the word bargain. What does it mean? The first thing that comes to your mind, is it about shopping bargain? We are not talking about that, but we are talking about bargain, which is an agreement in which both parties promised to do something for each other. I'm sure you must have done bargaining even at home, besides shopping. For instance, maybe you ask your father or said to your father, Father, today I'm going to do the laundry and please give me a pocket money of 50 rupees or 100 rupees or whatever the case may be. So you are trying to strike a deal with your father, and that is a bargain. If your father agrees and you go and wash your clothes, get paid for your work, then that becomes a bargain. So that's what we mean here in our lesson, the context, that is the last bargain, the meaning of bargain. The next word is not. You must have noticed that there is a slight difference with the spelling here. It means nothing, and not is not being used anymore because it is an archaic word which is outdated. But the poem here, it means nothing. The third word here is H. I'm sure you are familiar with these words, but for those of you who feel that it is a new word, it means fence. We are talking about fence. Now, let's understand the poem better. Now, in the lesson here, we get the picture of a laborer or a worker who is seeking for a job. He got attractive job offers, but he turned them all down. Now he's looking for a job. He wanted to do work. He wanted to labor, but when he got the offer, he turned them all down. What could be the possible reason here? The person wants to labor for something that is not material or temporary. So all those things that we have just discussed, such as power, money, those things are material. So perhaps maybe he's looking for something else. What is the person seeking in exchange for his work? What is the bargain that he is looking for? In other words, he is willing to work, but he does not want to be paid or get the bargain of money or power or any other things that are material, beautiful things which are material. So what is he looking for, and what is he willing to work for in order to get that? Let's find out. He found what he was looking for in the last bargain, but what is that bargain? Now, here is the explanation stanza-wise. Come and hire me, I cried, while in the morning. I want you to take a close look at the word and try to make sense of it. Here we find the laborer or the worker shouting at the top of his voice, perhaps, for someone to come and hire him. He's willing to work. And he cried out, while in the morning. So I hope you take note of that. So here the poem starts with the scene of a morning. And we all know that morning is the first hour of the day. It is a day is break up into morning, afternoon, and evening or night. So he started early in the morning wishing to work. Let's see whether he will get hired or not. I was walking on the stone-paved road. Again, we have here an image of a hard stone-laid road, and this is an imagery, and imagery is mental pictures created in the minds of the reader using words. So when we read this, we get to picture that the laborer is walking on a hard stone paved road, which is also signifying or referring to a person who wants to start early in the day and who is walking or making a journey in his life, which is hard life. So that is what we have here. Sword in hand, the king came in his chariot. Now, a king came when he was looking for a job in that way, heart-bitten in life and walking on a stone-paved road in that manner. The king came with a sword in his hand. Now, I want you to take a look at the word sword carefully again. What does it represent? Destructive things, things that can be used to harm. And the king represent, I'm sure you know, it represents power, tremendous power. So a king with lots of power, with a sword in his hand here, referring to the fact that power that can be very destructive. Sword in hand, the king came in his chariot. A chariot is a horse-drawn carriage. So we get the picture of a powerful king who came with a sword in his hand, and he said, he held my hand and said, I will hire you with my power. He held the hands of the laborer, which is signifying that, or meaning that he is trying to strike a deal with the laborer and said, I am going to hire you. I will use my power to hire you, and in return, you will work under my power. You will get power in order to perform your work. Now, here is a laborer who wants work desperately, and he is trying to strike a bargain. He's willing to work, but is he willing to work in order to gain power? But his power counted for naught, and he went away in his chariot. But what happened is that the laborer declined this offer, the offer that he would be paid, or in return for the bargain of his work, he would be given power. He did not want power, in other words. So that is what we find here. He got a very attractive job offer. Now, if we are given such an attractive job offer, or promised to be given some special powers to be able to do special things, I'm sure we would jump at that opportunity. But the laborer did not want power. He's not looking for power. He wants to strive in life in order to attain something else. What is that? Now, in the second stanza, we find that the scene changed completely, and we find here, in the heat of midday, the houses stood with shut doors. Now, in the afternoon, in the midday, in fact, we all know that it can be very hot, and what people usually do is we like to stay out of the sun and stay indoors. So we get here that picture. And yet, it is very hot. It must be very difficult to work in such kind of a weather condition. And yet, remember that the laborer or the worker is willing to work, and he's still looking for work. I wandered along the crooked lane. Crooked lane here means not straight. So again, signifying, giving us the image of his hard life, that he is trying to figure out life. And life as a journey was not a very easy journey. It was difficult. It was crooked. And he is still wondering about looking for a job, looking for someone to hire him, looking for a bargain that would give him things that are permanent. An old man came out with his bag of gold. Now, here is another attractive job offer, and an old man came with his bag of gold, with lots of money. This old man is again a representation of the fact that the person is someone who has lived his life, who has accumulated, collected, or gathered lots of wealth, and he is in such kind of a position. And he offered him lots of money. He pondered and said, I will hire you with my money. And he promised to give him money in return for his work. Interestingly, what happened is that he weighed his coins one by one, but I turned away. Now, take a look at this line very closely. He weighed his coins one by one. He is a very rich person, but he is acting like a miser, a greedy fellow who, again, another very important fact here is that who is measuring the labor of the laborer's work in terms of money. For the amount of work that you have done, this much of work that you have done, I am going to give you this much of money. So measuring his worth in terms of money. Now, do you think he had take up that offer? He went away, and in other words, he declined that offer again. Now, then in the next stanza, we have here the scene of evening scene. The sun is setting and it is almost about to get dark. The garden hedge was all aflower. I'm sure you remember that hedge here means fences, and fences means boundaries. So the opportunities are closing, or we get here the timeline of a day that is coming to an end. It is a beautiful scene, no doubt, but here comes the fair maid, and the fair maid came out and said, I will hire you with a smile. The fair maid promised him happiness, promised the laborer happiness. I will give you happiness. But what happened? Her smile paled and melted into tears, and she went back alone into the dark. But what happened is that even that promised happiness faded with time, and it turned into sorrow, and she faded back into the dark. So from all this stanza, we get to understand that all the offers are temporary things, are not permanent, and that is not what the poet or the speaker or the laborer is looking for. Now, finally, in the last stanza, we found that he had found what he was looking for in the last bargain. Now, in the last bargain, what happened? We get the picture of a sun glistening, a happy scene here on the sand, and the sea waves broke waywardly. We get the picture of nature where it is behaving as it should be, the sea waves breaking waywardly. And a child sat playing with shells. Now, take note of the word shell here. The child is playing with shells. That is something that is natural, that is free, that is given from the Mother Earth. And a child is playing with shells. The child here also represents innocence. You know, children are very innocent people. They are free from the evils of the world. And he found this child, and what happened is that the child raised his head and seemed to know me and said, I hire you with nothing. The child promised him that all I have is nothing. I'm going to hire you with nothing. Now that was the bargain. Interestingly, he seemed to recognize the laborer. And take note that the first one that has offered power was using his power to hire him, promised him power. The second one, the old man, was using money to hire him. The third one, that is the fair maid, was using something that is temporary, beautiful things, or a beautiful, representing beautiful things, temporary things. And yet this child did not offer anything, but seemed to recognize the labor as one of his own, and did not promise anything. And yet the poet or the speaker took up this offer. From henceforward, that bargain struck in child's play made me a free man. From then onwards, I have become a free man. So that was what he was looking for. The last bargain was that, in other words, he wants to labor for things that are lasting, for things that are permanent, for things that would make him a free man, free from the greed of wealth, free from the evil of power, free from temporary things such as beautiful things, but he wanted to be free like a child, and by being childlike and seeing things through the eyes of a child, he was able to become a free man. So that is the bargain, the last bargain. Now let's work with the poem here. Who is the speaker in the poem? I'm sure you know now. The speaker in the poem is the laborer, or you can say the worker, or the poet. The king, sword in hand, suggests wealth, power, or more power than wealth. I'm sure a king has got lots of wealth, but he also has power. So the third option here. The old man offered the speaker a lot of money. Why did he turn down the offer? He was offered a lot of money, but he turned it down because those are temporary things. Those were not what he was looking for. It did not promise him freedom. Now match the following. I have nothing to give except goodwill and cheer. I hire you with nothing. Her happiness was no more than sorrow in disguise. This was said by the fair maid. Her smile paled and melted into tears. The king's might was not worth much, but his power counted for naught. How did the speaker feel after talking to the child on the beach? Remember, the speaker felt free like a child, where he becomes free from all the evils of the world. How many persons, characters are there? I'm sure this is a very easy question, so I'll leave that to you. Do they stay together or part company? They parted company except for one, and I'm sure you know the answer, that is the child. Mention 3 things that are not permanent. 3 things that are not permanent, which is found in the poem The Last Bargain, is power, wealth, and material things which are beautiful. What do you think the speaker finds more important than all the other offer? Besides all the other offer that promised him money, power, wealth, and so on, he found that freedom, to be able to be free from all such kind of worldly things which are not lasting. Remember, the king went away in his chariot, the old man went away, the lady, her smile faded into the dark. So all these things are passing things, things which are not permanent, things which are temporary. So all those things are, the poet, or we can say the speaker, did not find it important, and he was looking for freedom. What is worth laboring or working for? The laborer, remember, he wants to labor. He cried out to be hired, in fact. And yet when he was offered, he declined them except for one. He was willing to work or labor for the right things, things which are permanent, things which will give him true happiness, bliss, and peace. And so here, I'm sure you are able to make the connection with the previous lesson, that is, with the lesson Bipin Babu Chowdhury's Lapse of Memory. You remember, Bipin Babu was working very hard, known to be a very hard-working person, but he was not a very helpful person when it comes to dealing with his friendships. And in life, those things are also important. Money is also important, wealth is also important, but everything has to be in limit and not in excess. Bipin Babu was working excessively, not even wishing to take a trip to Ranchi. So all these things are also important, and we need to balance it. And when we do that, we will find inner peace like a child. So with that, we have come to the end of our lesson. Thank you all very much for joining me.